If you've ever wished you had a podcasting pro with nearly a decade of experience whispering growth secrets into your ear, that's exactly what you'll get when you tune into Podcast Growth Tools with me, your host, Kylie Chandler. This is the ultimate show for you if you're ready to grow your podcast audience, skyrocket engagement, and turn your show into a traffic-driving, list-building powerhouse. I've been in the podcasting world since 2015, helping creators like Amy Porterfield grow their shows to over 1 million downloads a month. My superpower? Breaking down proven podcast strategies and marketing techniques into step-by-step guidance you can actually implement without fluff, overwhelm, or guesswork. On this show, we're getting real about what actually moves the needle when it comes to growing your podcast audience and using it to boost your email list growth. From actionable insights and expert interviews to behind-the-scenes secrets, I'll help you turn your podcast into a traffic-driving, list-growing machine. Grab your earbuds, hit subscribe, and let's take your podcast to the next level. Well, hey, and welcome back to the Podcast Growth Tools podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to my guest today. So it's Patrice Washington, and I have been a fangirl since probably 2018, 2019, when I had the opportunity to work with her when she came on Amy Porterfield's podcast. And I've just loved her message ever since then. So today, Patrice and I are really diving into how do you have a podcast that is still speaking so deeply to your purpose, that is adding so much value to those listening and allowing you to be authentic. We also talk about what it's like to show up and be really vulnerable, and how interesting it is that our society is craving these vulnerable episodes. And sometimes as a podcaster, you don't expect those to do well, but you hit publish anyway. And then those end up being some of your very best episodes. We talk about so many other things. Patrice is just an absolute light in this world. We talk about how you can continue to find joy within your podcast over and over and over again, and how you can let that joy lead you when it comes to content creation. I just absolutely loved this interview. It was such a wonderful experience to talk with her about all these things. And we just dove into so many fun and amazing conversations and kind of just explored where the conversation took us. So I know you're going to love it. So if you don't know who Patrice Washington is, she is an author, she's a podcaster, she has an online business called Redefining Wealth. And really at the end of the day, Patrice is focusing on supporting you in shifting your mindset so that you can focus on earning more with your gifts and really live out your purpose. And her tagline is chase purpose, not money. And so Patrice is amazing. You're going to love her. Let's dive into the episode. And before we do, I just want to thank you for being here. And I would love to invite you over to my newsletter. I'm always dropping podcast growth, wisdom tools, marketing tools, email list growth tools over there. And you can find that and sign up for that at podcastmarketinghub.com/subscribe. That's podcastmarketinghub.com/subscribe. Let's dive into this episode. I know you are going to love it. Enjoy. Welcome to the show, Patrice.
Thank you for having me, Kylie. I'm so proud of you. This is so cool.
Well, we were just bantering a little bit, and I was just loving up on you and everything that you're doing. And, for me, you've been such a light. I think Amy introduced me to you. And ever since then, I feel like you've had such an evolution, even in just the last 5 years of your business and everything. So
Oh, yeah.
thank you for being here. Thank you for spending time with me and my listeners. I introduced you in the intro, and I just want to dive into the good stuff. Talk to us a little bit about what made you decide you wanted to start the Redefining Wealth podcast.
Oh, my goodness. Well, before starting the Redefining Wealth podcast, Kylie, I was a regular on the Steve Harvey Morning Show, nationally syndicated radio show and talk show. And of course, with that came a lot of invitations to do other shows and to speak on so many stages and to visit churches and nonprofit organizations and all these places. And what I found consistently is that a lot of people felt like their challenges were about money, but the conversations we were having were about everything else under the sun. that impacted their finances. They just weren't even recognizing their language and the way they were asking the questions and what they were actually experiencing. And so, around 2016, early 2017, I remember being on the Dr. Oz show and I was so excited to be there. It was my second time there. And they're like, Patrice, what we're going to do is talk about saving on groceries. And they're like, we're going to have these two felt boards and you're going to move this, like, you think of kindergarten, right? I know you have kids. Think kindergarten, right? You're going to move this felt piece of broccoli and this apple and this fake banana from one board to the next. And then you're going to talk about how to save at the grocery store. And I remember experiencing what I call that still small voice that said to me, you don't believe that this is the truth about wealth. Is saving at the grocery store one element to this? Absolutely. But if you really talk to people deeply, you know that this is about more than just budgeting. This is about their belief system and their behaviors. And it was the first time since my bathroom floor moment, which is, I lost everything in the recession and rebuilt from scratch. And I remember when that still small voice came in, thinking to myself, I want to go everywhere and talk to people about what the truth about wealth, that it's not just money and material possessions. It's about our well-being, our happiness, and essentially our beliefs. Right. And I just, I cannot forget that moment at Dr. Oz. I went on to do the show. It was great. But when I left, I was like, I really have to create a space for myself and reintroduce myself because I feel strongly that enough people don't talk about true financial wellness. And that was the catalyst for redefining wealth. It was me wanting to represent the concept of wealth building to the masses and say, hey, I'm all for you knowing what's on your credit report, but we also need to look at what we're consistently doing in our lives that are not contributing to what we say we desire. And with that, Redefining Wealth was born September 2017. And yeah, we're heading into 8 years, over 20 million downloads.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful, and it's a huge accomplishment, so congratulations.
Thank you.
What do you feel like have been the biggest lessons learned over those 8 years? 20
Whew.
million downloads.
Okay, well, in what part? Personally, professionally?
What's the juiciest? Let's start with that.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I would say the juiciest thing, honestly, was recognizing that I thought I was using the podcast to be a blessing to other people, but honestly, this podcast saved my life. Redefining Wealth absolutely saved my life because the conversations that I kept being attracted to and pulled into were not just for the audience. It was illuminating and amplifying so many things for me because we talk about the 6 pillars of wealth, right? And we have these pillars. So real quick, fifth pillar is about becoming
Please.
your best self mentally and physically. People pillar is creating relationships that matter personally and professionally. We have the space pillar. It's about setting up your life to support you. Let's see, faith pillar, believing in something greater. Work pillar is live your life's purpose. And then finally, the money pillar is about attracting the prosperity you desire and then managing what you do have already wisely, right? And I thought that I was just there to share initially all of the lessons, the rituals, the behaviors, the mindset shifts that I really adapted and incorporated from 2007 to becoming America's Money Maven by 2011. Like, what were the things that I did? And so I thought I was just there to share, Kylie, but oh my gosh, what I got back in return
Mm.
was really illuminating some places where I had been on autopilot. And now at Redefining Wealth, we say you can't redefine wealth for yourself if you haven't awakened to what's truly not serving you. A lot of us operate on autopilot. We do the same things day in and day out. We don't interrogate ourselves. We don't question why we believe what we believe. We are just in default thinking, doing the same things in the same way for many years of our lives. And the guest that I had on the podcast illuminated for me that I was actually experiencing some things in my marriage that I had normalized and that I had romanticized, and they were not right. And it wasn't until I was interviewing people that I could hear certain pieces. Like, I'll give you an example. Dr. Tama Bryant Loved her episode. She has a book called Homecoming. And in our conversation and then in reading her book subsequently, she says that high achieving women do not stay in relationships that don't serve them because they're insecure. They usually stay because they're overconfident that they can fix someone and that their example can be the thing to move their partner forward. And I realized for me that this podcast and my career just kept growing and growing. And I kept going deeper and deeper into my own personal development and my own growth. And unfortunately, my former husband was not and did not want to. And was kind of doing things to undermine what we said collectively was our vision. But I didn't have the language until the podcast. And so for anyone who's even thinking about getting into podcasting, you may feel like you're doing it just because there's something for you to offer the world, which is true. But I am here to be a witness that there is something that the conversations and the insights that come out of a purposeful podcast will deposit back into you. And I mean, I've probably had 200 guests, and man, what a blessing it's been to me to not be on autopilot, but to be someone who is awakening over and over and over again. Does this serve me? Does it not? Is this what I see for my life or don't I? Is this the best that I believe? I say God, but other people may acknowledge whatever they do. Is this the best that's available to me? The podcast changed my life.
Oh, Patrice, that is so beautiful. And I'm kind of skipping ahead on the plan I had for this, but that is one thing that I love about your podcast. It always feels like I'm coming home because you're so vulnerable in it and you're so open. And you found this really beautiful way to marry being vulnerable, integrating your business into it, and still really serving your audience. And I feel like it's kind of this magical formula. How do you feel you've developed that ability to really be vulnerable on your podcast while still finding ways to integrate your business? Because that can be a hard thing, I think.
Yeah, I realize more and more as I coach women in particular that it is difficult for people to navigate. As we were chatting before we started recording, I shared with you I've been an entrepreneur most of my adult life. I don't really know much about being quote unquote politically correct. When you're navigating someone else's organization, there's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of rules and regulations. And I believe that unfortunately, many of us have been conditioned to not embrace our full selves. Because I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, I only know my full self,
Mhm.
right? And even the layers of that got buried in my former marriage, like I said, the podcast helped uncover and peel back the layers on that. But something that I would say to anyone who is navigating that is a couple things. First of all, vulnerability does not mean that you have to divulge every detail,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
I tend to navigate this from the perspective of what am I experiencing that will serve my community and my audience? I look at it as a form of service, quite frankly. It's not me telling my business. It's not because I don't have friends that I could go to. It's not like I'm not in a group chat where I could share some of these things or not in therapy or something. No, I'm always like thinking of what my first grade teacher, Miss Boynton, said.
Mhm.
She taught me at 5, 6 years old, Patrice, when you know something, excuse me, it's your responsibility to share with friends. It's not enough that you know. Once you know something, you help other people. And I'm 44 almost. In a month here, I'll be 44 years old. And so I've walked with that idea for almost 40 years, which is when I know something, how do I share? And how do I share it in a way that is constructive, that can be a blessing to others, not from a place of like, this is what you need to do. It's more like, here's what I'm processing. Here's what I'm considering. Here's what I've been looking at on this subject matter. Here's what my path was. And I hope that some of this serves you. And I think that people can just feel your heart. I genuinely believe that people can feel your heart, your intention, your energy, towards whatever you're doing. And so even my former husband who hears me talk about him on platforms, he knows that I'm going to do it because I'm doing it with the intention of how can I use my story to be a blessing to others, not how can I bash him. We still are great co-parents and he's a wonderful father to my daughter and we co-parent just fine. Like no challenges in co-parenting. We were just sitting down at Starbucks the other day talking about, graduation season and all the things that are
My
coming up.
gosh.
And so I think that the vulnerability is just rooted in service. And I think what makes it hard is when we think that we're sharing because it's about us. I think that this culture of like everyone wants to be an expert or a guru has made people feel like they have to show up like with all the things as opposed to desiring to just be a guide. When you come from this place of like, hey, been there, done that, I've been through some valleys. If you're navigating a valley, let me hold your hand as you go back up the mountain because you don't have to be here long. We don't have to stay here forever. Let me share what I've learned. Let me help you process that. Then the vulnerability is just easy because I don't have anything to I used to always tell my clients, I still do, like, I'm here out of obedience, not perfection. Please don't look at me as like perfection. I'm not. On any given day, I'm really awesome and a hot ass mess. So do not do not look to me for that. But if you want someone who's genuinely going to share the good, the bad, the ins and outs, let me hold your hand. That way, you extend grace to yourself in how you show up on your platform because you're also being very gracious with where your audience is on their journey as well. And I think it's just the reciprocity that makes it a beautiful dance in a natural way to just share like, hey, and when you're ready, here's how, we can connect or I can support you.
That is amazing. And there's another piece that came up for me in all of this because I started kind of asking myself, like, how would I answer this question? And
Hmm.
one thing that I love about podcasting, I mean, I love your mug. It's so cute. I need one.
Look at,
Uh,
look, that's my baby on the other side.
oh my gosh. And she's going to graduate soon.
In that 3 months. That's
Oh my
it. That's all I
gosh.
got.
Congratulations.
Thank
Exciting
you.
and scary.
Yes, both. Yes.
Well, one thing I love about podcasting, and a big reason that I finally want to be on this side and have my own podcast, which I've been supporting others for so long, is being able to have these conversations. And for instance, having you on and thinking to myself, Patrice has such an important message. How can I amplify that out? And selfishly, I get to sit here and I get to chat with you and I get to have this beautiful, vulnerable conversation that, just like you said, is going to help me grow. So I am so excited to really be hearing the back talk about podcasting being 2025 is the year of collaboration for podcasters. And so I'm so excited about that specifically.
Kylie, you know what I love about these conversations? I always get such confirmation. Like I'm a big dreamer. I dream a lot. I think as most entrepreneurs, we're visionaries and we have these, I call them downloads and these ideas that drop
Yes.
in. Just 2 hours ago, after the gym, I'm showering, I drop into this idea. I have these girls that I'm collaborating with, Brooke Hemingway and Amberly Lago. We're doing a mastermind collab in Hawaii in July. We're bringing all of our masterminds together for the first time that we've really seen someone do this model that we're doing.
Mhm.
But what I sent them a voice memo about just 2 hours ago, I said, "Hey guys, why don't we collaborate on a podcast episode? We can just record the episode and we can all put our individual intros and outros on it and put our individual links in our show notes, but let's collab." And now you're saying this is the year of collaboration and I'm like, "Oh my gosh. Yes, yes, yes. I feel that so much." And for anyone who heard Kylie say that and you're like, I don't know, here's a real life example of me just literally sending that to someone like 2 hours to the girls like 2 hours ago. And they're like, yes, let's do it. And I love that. This space has connected me with such amazing people that honestly, I'm not sure if I would have met them in any other medium. I don't know if I would have sat by them at the event or had a chance to talk to them backstage or any of those things, but podcasting really gives you that backstage pass to create amazing connection. And both the ladies, by the way, that I'm referencing, both Brooke and Amberly, I met them via podcasting. I met them because they both invited me on their podcast, and then the relationships just grew from there. So I love it. I love what you're doing, and I love what you're sharing with people.
This is like I have chills and you know, you coming on, like I had Amy on
Hmm.
last week and we did an interview and we had lots of tangible stuff. And when I was thinking about our interview, Patrice, I'm like, it's just gonna be like heartfelt and this and that. I didn't think we were going to get super tangible, but you literally just gave my audience something that if you're listening and you that gets you excited to be like, "Oh, I have 3 people, 2 people I could do a podcast with and then we can all share it with our own individual intros and outros." I love this approach. It's so good. And I
Yeah.
can't wait. Will you please share it with me so I can
Yeah.
share it with
We're
the
going to
world when
do
it comes out?
it. Yeah, we're going to do it. It's so exciting. I think that this
Mhm.
season too, it feels so heavy out in the world.
Mhm.
Like if we're all radically honest, right? There's just a heaviness, and it doesn't matter what you believe in, who you voted for, this or that. It's just a collective, wow, there's so much going on. And my big thing, what I teach in the Redefining Wealth app, so that's the community I have for my podcast audience. And so it's a free app, and I go live there every single day with just a word of encouragement or some way to add value and bless the community. And what I keep trying to get them to understand, Kylie, is this. There's so much heaviness in the world. Whatever you can do to lighten your load while being consistent to your vision, keep going in that direction. So for us, if we're all recording podcast episodes anyway, how
Mhm.
do we lighten the load? Well, we collaborate. We take this, this conversation that we want to have, and now it's a blessing that gets to have such a ripple effect in three, communities and go so far with 1 hour, right?
Mhm.
It's like, yes, we usually dedicate that 1 hour to our own individual places or spaces, but now it can be amplified in so many ways. And so, yes, is it going to move people towards our retreat in July in Hawaii? Absolutely. But we all get to also say, yeah, I had a fun time doing this. We get to add the lightheartedness back into it. We get to put the joy back into it. My
Yeah.
favorite thing to say now is like, joy is my currency. Like,
I
I
love
think joy,
that.
speak joy, act with joy. Like, if it doesn't bring me joy, I don't want it. And so, um, just when it's so heavy out in the world, how can we lighten the load for ourselves and how we show up in the tools that we use in the collaborations that we seek? How do we lighten the load? And always be thinking like, okay, I have this thing I always say. I think I said it on Amy's last event, last entrepreneur experience that I spoke at. I'm like, I have this thing that I say, how do I achieve X without Y? And
Mhm.
so, how do I achieve impact without overwhelm? Like when it comes to this particular thing in my business, how do I reach people without burning myself out or how? And so that's one of those, how do I allow, the impact to happen while still keeping it simple and fun and full of joy. So I hope that helps too.
It does. It does. And I love like the things that stand out is fun and joyful. And podcasting should be fun and joyful. And because at the end of the day, why are we here? We're here to serve other people and to put out these episodes that either bring them joy, let them take a little vacation while they're on their walk or in the middle of the day or whatever it might be. And so thank you for sharing that. So I actually, speaking of other people and other collaborations, you're on Anthony O'Neill's podcast, and he's wonderful and amazing. And you said that I'm in a season of where I'm prioritizing peace and purpose over appearances. Is
Oh
that
yeah,
correct?
that is. That is. That was one of the big things that has also come out of the podcast. Like all of
Yeah.
the work that I've done in the interviews have really
Yeah.
led me on a journey of more self-love and self-trust. And
Mm.
in the self-love and self-trust, not only did it illuminate for me that I was trying to hold on to a marriage that just was not aligned for me personally, it also allowed me to see that one of the reasons I didn't own that. Like I knew it for years before I could really own it. But one of the reasons I didn't own it is because I was taught to keep up appearances. I think, like many of us are, it's kind of that idea of, um, the picture perfect family. I didn't grow up with my father in the home. Um, it was really important to me as a young girl. My idea of what I desired was to, raise my children in the same home as their father and like all of those things. And even though I had the appearance of it, and it wasn't all bad all the time, not at all, it didn't come with a lot of peace for me on a
Mm,
regular basis, if I'm radically honest. Like there were too many different times where it wasn't like a chaotic environment externally, but I would experience chaos internally. Like
yeah.
the self-doubt and what's wrong with me? Should I be doing something different? I'm praying, I'm fasting, I'm doing all the things to be the best wife possible. And I'm doing all of the things and I don't feel like it's being reciprocated. So what's wrong with me?
Mm,
And coming out of that marriage really taught me that before I ever put appearances like at the forefront, I have to know that I have complete peace. I want to be always not just a public success, but a private success. I don't want to be a public success and a private failure, and a failure to myself. A failure meaning I'm not living my most rooted, authentic, radical honesty and truth at all times, first and foremost for myself. And so, yeah, I did say that on Anthony's podcast and probably a thousand other places. But in this season of my life, since I turned 40, I definitely have been like, no, I'm prioritizing appearances over, I'm sorry, I'm prioritizing peace over appearances. And I remember telling Amy this. Amy used to be my little, she wanted to be my matchmaker. So we would text and she would like, what's going
of
on in your
course.
love life?
Yep.
What's
That's
going
an
on?
Amy thing for sure.
Yes, she would say, "What's going on in your love life, friend? Fill me in," and all the things. And I remember I was dating this guy who looked really great on paper. I mean, he looked really great in person. Like he's a big guy, very fit, very handsome, big social media following, big presence online, also a speaker, all these things. And within a few weeks of dating him, I was like, this does not give me peace. This does not feel
Mm,
like the way that I want to be loved and the way that I desire to be loved. And I was like, you know what? I trust myself to choose better for myself in this season. And I have to lead with peace, no appearances. And so within 5 weeks, I was like, yeah, I can't do this. And I remember people who knew, they were like, oh my gosh, but he's so this and he's so that.
yeah.
All those things are true. And also, what's true is he doesn't give me peace. I don't feel safe in his presence. And so, for that, I will not prioritize appearances to keep y'all happy while undermining what I promised myself because I wrote vows to myself. I talked about this on the podcast. I have told all my business on the podcast, but I wrote vows to myself on what would have been my 16th wedding anniversary. And I stick to the vows. I wrote to
Mm,
myself about honoring myself, protecting, listening to my body, listening to my soul, knowing that I don't have to make anything fit or make anyone fit. If it doesn't, I have to be okay with releasing it with love and dignity and all those things. And so this season, I've just been, yeah, prioritizing that. So those are the things. Following the vows always lead me to peace. Anytime I'm not following those vows,
mm.
something feels off. And it's usually trying to keep up appearances, and I just refuse.
I just want to take that in for a moment and everyone who's listening too. I love that practice so much. And there's a couple things that just came to mind. One, I'm not quite 40, but my sister just turned 40
Mhm.
and our aunt is so sweet. And she sent her a text and said, your 40s are the best years. Everybody thinks that the 20s are the 30s. She's like, just wait, 40s are the best. So I love
Yes.
that.
Yes,
I love that.
auntie. I agree.
And the other piece is I just resonate so much with what you are saying. So my little girl is 22 months. She's almost 2 and she's the cutest thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
I'm
And
sure.
it is I just it's so interesting we're having this conversation, Patrice, because I was just thinking about how somewhere along the line in those last 22 months plus 9 months of being pregnant, I stopped caring about appearances and I
Mm,
started really diving into what feels good. And kind of going back to what this podcast is about, podcast growth tools, I don't think if I would have started a podcast before I was a mama, I
mhm.
don't know that I would have followed the joy in each of it. And literally, anytime I reach out to somebody to be a guest, anytime I think about a solo episode, I go, would that bring me joy? Would talking to that person and spending 45 minutes to an hour with them really bring me joy?
Yeah.
And so everything you're saying is so powerful as a podcaster, as an entrepreneur, as
Hmm.
anyone. I mean, I think just finding that joy.
Can I tell you God's honest truth? That has been the number one thing I've led Redefining Wealth podcast with since the beginning, since the inception. People would say, "Oh, you need to get so and so on your podcast because they had a big name or they had a big platform." And then I would look them up and I would think, I don't think that I would get any joy from having this conversation. And I can't see the value for my audience. Not that if they listen to this person in a different space on or on their own on YouTube or found them some other way that they couldn't get value from it, but there had to be the connection of both. Not just could the audience get value, but also could I get joy? Because ultimately, my audience is going to feel that. If I'm like sold out for the conversation or if I'm really into it and I'm vibrating high and I'm excited about it, they're going to feel the passion, the enthusiasm, and all those things, which is what keeps people coming back. If it
Mm,
becomes a platform for me, at least this is how I've looked at it. If it becomes a platform where I'm just having these conversations just to check off that I recorded an episode this week, why am I in it?
yeah.
Like what am I doing that for? And that goes back to appearances. Is it because I want to have the appearance of being a thought leader who is connected with these certain people? Or because I genuinely have some passion, some purpose, and some peace behind wanting to like really elevate these conversations for my audience. And so we actually say no to way more pitches than we say yes to. And a lot of them are very impressive pitches. But once I go and research and check it out, if it just doesn't feel aligned, I don't try to force it because I think the audience can feel the force. There's a
Yeah.
few times out of 400 plus episodes, there's probably like three or four times where because of the podcast network or because of a brand deal, I ended up, in a conversation that genuinely for me was like, meh, meh. But I'm like, those are still good odds. Out of 400 plus episodes, if there's only like 1% that made me feel that way, I'm like, that's okay, but overwhelmingly, I've navigated for almost 8 years the same way that you're saying with that spirit of, does this bring me joy? And do I genuinely feel like the listener is going to get value?
I think it's so important that you say that because one thing I do think about with my clients and other, just sharing with them is like we don't always have to go for the big name people cuz I worked with, lots and there's been times where it's like so and so is so big and they come on and you're like I don't even know if I want to air that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, oh, I hear you, and thank
I've
you
been
for
there.
saying that. I bet you have. I'm sure,
Uh-huh.
a lot of people wanna come on your show. So, I wanna we'll come back to joy, but one thing, because I want honesty here, is have there been times where you recorded an episode? I mean, you just answered this for guests, but more on a personal level that you were
Mhm.
thinking, should I put this out for my audience? Should I put it? Oh, I don't know. Nervous about it, whether it's you really shared something vulnerable or something
Mhm.
like that. Have you ever had those moments and how did you work through them and what did you do and what was the response?
Girl, first of all, heck yeah. Because so many of my solo episodes are so vulnerable, I usually feel really sold out for the idea of recording it. Like, usually I feel very compelled in a direction. It is literally following just this energy. Some of it is alignment to maybe we have a launch or something going
Yeah.
on. But a lot of times it is definitely like, I just feel compelled. I have to say something. And if I'm radically honest, many of my best solo conversations have come on the backside of an uncomfortable experience with someone. And I'm really processing the lessons that I've learned. Like years ago, I did a episode called Stop Romanticizing Expired Relationships. And that was on the heels of a really difficult separation between me and someone who worked on my team for years.
Mhm.
And when it was all said and done, I felt really hurt and betrayed in how things happened. And I never went into the details of that. But the emotion, I was up at like 2 o'clock in the morning because I had to get it out. And I probably cried, if I'm not mistaken, on that episode. And, before sending it off to the podcast production team, I was like, do I really want to share this? Like, do I sound like a crazy person? Because it's like, I got my man voice on. It's the middle of the night,
I'm still like, I'm not even my wake up voice
Yeah.
because it's 2
It's
a.m. This should be my sleeping voice.
Yeah, like I don't even feel like I sound cute right now. But I believe that episode and episodes like it, like in 2022 when I announced to the community that I was divorcing, and it was called Dream a New Dream. And, it was such an emotional, but not emotional because I was very level headed with how I shared. But of course, folks have been with me, some of them for 10 years following my journey. All they know is me as a married woman.
Sure.
And so sharing those types of things, yeah, when I recorded that episode, I'm like, there's just that moment where you're like, all right. But I always come back to, were my intentions pure? Like, did I share from the perspective of what I'm learning? I never share from the perspective of, oh, I'm a victim, because what I want my audience to know, whatever we're experiencing, we can come out as victors. It's all about framing and perspective and all those things. And I go back to what Miss Boynton said. When you know something, you have a responsibility to share with friends. And so I always come back to, at the end of the day, that sense of, I have a responsibility to share with friends. But it's usually, I will say this, the episodes that I'm most like, should I? Overwhelmingly the ones that people say, oh my God, thank you. Thank you for sharing your heart. Thank you for sharing your experience. Those are the ones, sometimes the ones that you think are like this is a home run. This was the best thing I've ever done. People are like, it was good. Like, thanks for that. But the ones where you allow the vulnerability, from a very genuine and authentic place, I have found that those are the ones where people are like, thank thank you for showing up, thank you for your obedience, thank you for being real, thank you, thank you, thank you. Like, I feel like those are always the ones.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, when you start to look at unique listeners and everything like that, it's there in the downloads. And also, but actually, no, it isn't always there in the downloads. It's always there in the comments you get. It's always there in, that's where it is. They start coming in through DMs and emails and things like that. So thank you
That
for
I can
sharing that.
can we just acknowledge that too? I think for anyone who's starting a podcast, it's also really important to understand not to place all their value just on the number of downloads.
Mhm.
Something that I had to learn as well is really looking at how long are people listening, because the length of how long they're listening really shows how much they're internalizing, and that connection is being built. And I realized, like, some of the people who have ultimately come and work with me, I don't know that they were always people who commented publicly on the YouTube feed or even on Instagram. But oh my goodness, when you really connect with someone, the way people will go out of their way to figure out your email,
Yeah.
and the way that they will drop into your DMs. And I have so many messages and screenshots. I have like this,
Mm.
I call it like my little, it's the folder on my phone that I think when it's all said and done and my life is winding down, these are the messages that I will go back and read. Oh, I feel like crying just thinking about it.
Mm.
These are the messages that I will go back and read. There are paragraphs. There of people just saying, I listened to such and such episode and I just have to tell you, you freed me. You inspired me. You moved me to become an entrepreneur, or you moved me to own this thing or that thing, or to be a better parent, or blah, blah, blah. Like, all of these things, don't get always caught up in just the numbers. These are real people.
Mm.
Like, the blessing, when you think about the ability to reach people all over the country, all over the world, who you would not have otherwise met, and they are taking in your words and they are making it their own and they're applying it to their lives, and it is helping them shift something that golly, it's just look at the power and the magnitude. Even if you get 50 downloads on an episode, in what world can you go outside and say, gather around 50 people, let
Yes.
me just tell you what's on my mind, you know? Like, we take that for granted because we're like, well,
Mhm.
no, I want millions of this or millions of
Mhm.
that. Oh my gosh. To be able to leverage your creativity and your knowledge and your experience and your life and all those things, and even speak to 50 people. And if half of them go and do something with it, oh my gosh. Like, please don't discredit that. It is beautiful. I know you hear from people of 20 million downloads, 10 million
Mm.
downloads, 100 million downloads, and all those things. Please, like, I was gonna say, "Ooh, child." That's something that I would say. It was just about to spill out of me, Kylie. But like, "Oh, child," like to understand the power of that impact. Oh my goodness. And remember, an audience of one is still an audience. The
Mhm.
beautiful thing about podcasting is you get to build your voice as you go. When I listen to my
Yeah.
like first 10 episodes, I don't know how I got those first 100,000 downloads. I listened to those first 10 episodes and I'm like, girl, what were you even doing? You know? But you keep at it because you understand that an audience of one is still an audience, and celebrate and cherish those 50 downloads. Celebrate every milestone that you get. Celebrate when you hit 100.
Yeah.
Celebrate when you hit 500. Celebrate when you hit 1,000. Don't be someone who despises small beginnings and then you say, oh, well, when I hit 250,000, then it'll be worth it. If that's the only time it's worth it to you, you'll never get there because you're not going to be consistent
Preach.
enough.
Oh, I love this conversation. And Patrice, the reason that you have such a unique perspective is because you've been in the podcasting industry for 8 years, which means you went through the iOS update.
Ooh,
You've been with the industry and you've seen the podcast like in
oof,
their golden age where
I
it's like
did.
millions. And
Yeah.
then, we're here. And so same thing. I generally work with big name or like bigger audience podcasters, but I have people come to me and say, I'm only getting 100 downloads an episode. And I'm like, invite them into your living room. Have them knock on your door and say, I'm really interested in what you have to say. Like, how would that make you feel?
It's
So thank you for
incredible.
sharing that.
I've known some big podcasters too. I mean, I went to a podcast summit that I spoke at in California, and we did a mastermind beforehand. And there's so many of us who, as you call it, the golden age. It's so interesting now. I didn't even realize that I would be a pioneer.
Yeah.
But
Right.
during the golden age where, we were getting 40, 50,000 downloads an episode easy,
Right.
and I don't want to say easy, but it was definitely more, accessible to us in 2018, 2019. And then, oh my goodness, the pandemic, for those of us who had
Right.
established podcasts, people were just binging our back catalog and therefore running up the downloads because they were at home, right? And that was wonderful. And so the iOS update happened, and I was talking to some other, big name podcasters, and we're like, gosh, we only get 10,000 downloads now, maybe 8,000 downloads on an episode. And it's so interesting to have that woe is me like concept once you've been doing 30, 40, 50,000 downloads an episode. And I remember just, chatting with some of the ladies, and I'm like, so in what world can we go somewhere though and have 7,000 people even stop and listen to us for 7 minutes? Like, in what world
Mhm.
is that possible? And also darn near free or very low cost. Because to host an event takes a lot of time, effort, and money to put on.
Yeah.
I do an annual event now. It takes a lot of effort and planning and time and money to front load these events, in-person events.
Mhm.
In most of these spaces, where are 5,000 people going to listen to you? Podcasting, even with the iOS updates, is still for me one of the premier places for people to discover me, and for me to be able to do like you said, let me invite you in closer, let me invite you into my world, come into the Redefining Wealth app, come into these spaces that I've curated. There's not a lot of places where you can just do that and at least have some control over your conversation, because most social media platforms, we don't have any damn control. We're at the mercy of their algorithms that day, unless you want to do paid traffic. And so again, if you have 50 people consistently that are listening to you, I always tell my team, it doesn't take a million people to create $1 million a year. It doesn't take a million listeners to create $100,000 business. We're so focused on quantity and not quality. It's the quality of the people and whether they are aligned to your voice and your message. If you have that down, you can survive even a time like this.
I feel like I've gotten more chills in this conversation that I mean, just so many things, but you'll appreciate this. So, I've managed email lists of 400,000 people and podcasts of 1.2 million. And now that I'm such an early entrepreneur person, I'm like, okay, oh my gosh, I got 4 new subscribers and I'm over the moon. Like, oh my gosh, I've hit double digits. I have 100, so
Yeah.
it's just, I hope that we're all redefining what that means, especially as podcasters. Okay. Well, I want to ask one more question. And that is if you could sit down with any podcaster in any
Mm.
space, who would you sit down with and what would you ask them?
Oh, this is such a great question. Any podcaster. My brain is trying to separate my brain is trying to separate podcasters versus personalities whose stuff just gets repurposed in a podcast. So
Mhm.
that's where it was like, do,
Sure.
do, 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 do. But I don't know. I would just say the first thing that dropped into my spirit was Brene Brown. It would be having a conversation with Brene Brown because I'm just so fascinated by her studies in vulnerability and clear as kind and just all these things that feel very aligned with where I am and how I navigate my life when it comes to leveraging radical honesty and navigating uncomfortable conversations, allowing my nervous system to be comfortable even in comfortable conversations. So what would I ask her though? I would say, "Can you download everything you know into me? Thank you."
Yeah. You're
I
like,
don't
"So you
know.
have 55 minutes.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I am here to listen."
Yeah, like, is there anything that you just feel like I should know? Just speak from your spirit and you just talk. I won't even ask questions. Maybe I'll ask clarifying questions, but yeah, I would say Brene Brown.
That's a beautiful answer, and
Mhm.
I love it. Well, Patrice, you are such a gift. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for being here. Where
Oh,
can my listeners go and learn more about you, listen to your podcast, check out your app, all that stuff?
yeah. Well, all things Patrice Washington, live at patricewashington.com. However, this is your special invitation. I'm in the middle of a 365-day consistency challenge. And
Mm.
at the time of this recording, I'm around day 65 or so, where I have literally just been showing up every day in my app and speaking life and pouring into my community. And we have about 2,600 purpose chasers from all over the world. And that's just really a space that I want to be a safe haven for people who want to stay focused on their vision and using the pillars that I teach from to protect whatever that vision is in this season of their lives. And so whether you're an entrepreneur or you're side hustling or you're an executive creating something, whatever it is, we are open and welcome to all. I am just really excited to hold space and encourage people to keep going in this season. Redefining wealth looks like not getting so caught up in everything that's going on around us. It's really about going within and creating such a strong foundation of well being. So when all of this is said and done, can you come out on the other side well? That's what I want to see people. So,
Yeah.
Redefining Wealth app, totally free on your iOS or Android device.
I will be there. And I will just say, we didn't get super, super into the pillars because I know you've shared so much about them. So, anyone listening who hasn't gotten into your 6 pillars yet, I really encourage you to go check
Yeah.
that out. Get Patrice's book. She's an author, of course, and all of the good things. So, Patrice, I will be linking everything up for my audience.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
being here. Thank you for all of the joy and the fun and the value that you bring to this world.
Thank you, Kylie, and continue blessings on this journey. I'm excited to see what you do and where you go.
Thank you.